My wife was gone, and I was standing at her hospital bedside holding a plastic bag with her watch, her reading glasses, and $43 in cash. That was all they gave me. 43 years of marriage, and they handed me a plastic bag. The drive home from Mercy General took 20 minutes. I don't remember any of it. I just remember pulling into the driveway and sitting there with the engine running, staring at the front door, thinking about how she was the one who always turned the porch light on when I came home late. It was off. The whole house was dark. My son called that night. My daughter-in-law didn't. I didn't think much of it then. People grieve differently. I told myself that. I told myself a lot of things that week. The funeral was on a Thursday. February, cold and grey the way only Ohio can be cold and grey. The kind of cold that doesn't just get into your coat, it gets into your thinking. The cemetery was called Lakeview, though there was no lake anywhere near it. Just flat fields and a highway you could hear in the distance. There weren't many people. My wife. Her name was Dorothy, though everyone called her Dot. She had outlived most of her friends. Her sister flew in from Phoenix. My son stood beside me in his good coat, the one he wore to job interviews, and he kept checking his phone. I noticed that. I didn't say anything. I was standing at the graveside when the man approached me. He was maybe 65, heavy-set, wearing a county work vest over a flannel shirt. One of the groundskeepers. I'd seen him earlier operating the backhoe out near the tree line, and I'd had the strange thought that it must be a hard job doing that every day, digging holes for people's people. He came up beside me during the reception, that awkward half-hour afterward when people stand in the cold and nobody knows whether to leave. He didn't look at me when he spoke. He just positioned himself close, like he was reading one of the nearby headstones, and said very quietly, "Your name, Alderman." I said yes. He said, "Clifton Alderman? Used to work at Hargrove Savings on 5th. I turned to look at him. "I retired from there 11 years ago. How do you know that?" He still wasn't looking at me. His jaw was tight. "Your wife. She came to see me 3 weeks ago. Said if something happened to her, I was supposed to find you at the service." He paused. "She said not to tell your son." I thought I'd misheard him. The wind was up, and my ears weren't what they used to be. "What did you say?" He reached into his vest pocket and pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. Small, like it had been torn from a notepad. He said, "Don't go home tonight. Don't go back with your son. Go to the extended stay on Millbrook Road. Room 22. There's something there she needed you to find." Then he walked away and went back to his equipment. I stood there with the paper in my fist and my son appeared at my elbow. "Dad, we should get going. Nadine made dinner." Nadine is my daughter-in-law. I noticed she hadn't come to the funeral. My son had told me she wasn't feeling well. She'd sent flowers instead. Nice flowers, actually. I'd thought that was kind of her. "Give me a minute," I said. I watched my son walk back toward the cars. I looked down at the paper. There was nothing written on it. Just a room key card, old style, the kind that hotels were phasing out, with the number 22 written on it in black marker. My wife had given a groundskeeper at the cemetery a hotel key card to give to me at her own funeral. I wanted to believe I was confused. I was 67 years old. I had just buried my wife of 4 decades, and grief does things to a person's mind. But I knew what I had heard. And I knew Dorothy. She did not do things without reason. My son called out again, "Dad, car's running." I put the keycard in my coat pocket and went to the car. At my son's house, I sat at the dinner table and ate the food Nadine had made. A roast chicken, green beans, a roll. And I watched my son and his wife talk around me the way people do when they have agreed beforehand not to bring something up. I couldn't say what it was they were avoiding. Maybe grief. Maybe they just didn't know what to say to an old man who had just buried his wife. But there was something in the way Nadine refilled my water glass without meeting my eyes. Something careful. After dinner, my son suggested I stay the night. He'd made up the guest room. I told him I appreciated it, but I'd rather be in my own house. He said he understood. He offered to drive me. I said I had my car. I left at 8:30. I did not go home. Millbrook Road was about 12 minutes from my son's neighborhood, out past the Target and the old Sears building that had been a trampoline park for 2 years, and then just an empty building again. The Extended Stay America was a 2-story brick place that had seen better decades. The parking lot was half full. The office light was on. I sat in my car for a while. I'm not a dramatic man. I worked in banking for 31 years. I coached Little League for 8 seasons. I have never once thought of myself as a man to whom unusual things happen. And yet here I was, 67 years old, with the hotel key card my dead wife had arranged for a cemetery worker to deliver to me at her funeral. I got out of the car. Room 22 was on the ground floor, around the side, facing the parking lot. I stood in front of the door for a long moment. Then I slid the key card in and the light turned green. The room was dark. I found the light switch. My wife had been in this room. I knew it immediately, the way you know a smell you've known for 40 years. Her coat was folded over the back of the desk chair. Her small blue suitcase, the one she took on overnight trips, the one I used to call her runaway bag as a joke, was on the luggage rack. On the desk was a manila envelope with my name on it, written in her handwriting. I sat down on the edge of the bed and held the envelope for a minute without opening it. My hands were shaking in a way I don't usually let them. Then I opened it. Inside was a letter, 12 pages, front and back, in her careful cursive. And underneath the letter, a stack of documents. I'm going to try to explain what I read, but I want to be honest with you. Some of it I had to read 3 times before I understood it, and some of it I still struggle with, not because it's complicated, but because it means my wife of 43 years was carrying something that I didn't know about, and she carried it alone. The letter started, Cliff. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was afraid of what you would do. You've always been the kind of man who tries to fix things, and this was not something that could be fixed. Her name, before she was Dorothy Alderman, was Dorothy Greer. And before she was Dorothy Greer, briefly, when she was 22 years old, she was a witness to a crime. It was 1979. She was working as a bookkeeper at a construction company in Columbus, called Belmont Ridge Development. Her boss was a man named Stafford. She didn't write his first name, just Stafford. And Stafford was running a scheme that she only partly understood at the time. He was overbilling government contracts, federal contracts, roads, drainage projects, a school renovation. He was billing for materials that were never purchased, labor that was never performed, and pocketing the difference through a shell company his brother-in-law ran. Dorothy had started noticing the numbers didn't match. She was 22 and good at math, and she had the misfortune of being honest. She brought it to Stafford's attention, thinking she'd made an error somewhere. He told her she was mistaken. She went back to the books. She wasn't mistaken. She went back to the books. She wasn't mistaken. She went to the FBI. She was a federal witness for 14 months. She testified before a grand jury. Stafford went to prison. His brother-in-law went to prison. 2 other men went to prison. And Dorothy was given a new identity and relocated to Ohio, which was 3 states away from where she'd grown up, and she was told to start over. She was 24 years old. She built her life. She became Dorothy Greer. She got a job. She made friends. She met me at a church social in the autumn of 1981, and she never told me any of it. I know how that sounds, she wrote. I know you will feel like I lied to you, and I suppose I did, by omission, every single day. But I want you to understand that by the time I met you, I had already decided that the woman I used to be was gone. I had grieved her. The FBI had told me that Stafford's associates had made threats. They told me I should be careful, and I was. For 40 years I was careful, and then I stopped being careful because I thought enough time had passed. What she meant by that was in the documents. 8 months before she died, she had received a letter at our house. She didn't tell me about it. The letter was from a man named Fulton. No first name, just Fulton. And it referenced her previous name, the name she hadn't used in over 40 years. It said he knew who she was. It said there were people who had never forgotten what she'd done. It said he would be in touch. She had contacted her original FBI handler, a retired agent named whoever it was, and he had told her the threat was likely credible. Stafford had died in 2019, but his son had spent years quietly looking. Her testimony had cost the family not just Stafford's freedom, but their business, their reputation, and what amounted to several $1 million in forfeited assets. The son had resources and a long memory. The FBI opened a new file. They recommended she take precautions. They recommended she tell her family. She hadn't told me because she said she knew I would go find the son myself, and she was probably right about that, and she said she couldn't bear to put me in danger when she was already, in her words, running out of road. She had been diagnosed with congestive heart failure the previous spring. She hadn't told me how serious it was. She'd said it was manageable. She hadn't told me that her cardiologist had given her a realistic window. She had been protecting me from that too. I have spent a great deal of time thinking about what to leave you with, she wrote, near the end of the letter. What I've decided is that I want you to know the truth. All of it, and I want you to be careful. Don't go back to the house tonight. I don't know when or if someone will act on Fulton's threat, but I don't want you there alone, not knowing. The FBI contact is in the envelope. His name is Agent Creighton, out of the Columbus field office. He knows everything. He's been expecting your call. I left some things in the blue suitcase that you'll need. The account information is in there. I moved money from the joint savings into a separate account in your name only. I didn't want it to be accessible if someone came looking. The passcode is the year we got married and the street number of the first apartment where we were happy. You'll know. I love you, Clifton. I have loved you every day for 43 years. And I loved you before that without knowing you yet. I'm sorry for the secrets. I kept them because I could not imagine my life without you in it, and I was afraid the truth would make you see me differently. I hope it doesn't. I hope you can understand why a 22-year-old girl who had done the right thing and lost everything because of it decided, when she finally found something worth keeping, to hold on to it with both hands and never let go. I read that page 4 times. Then I sat in that hotel room for a long while, and I looked at my wife's coat on the chair and her blue suitcase, and I thought about 43 years of mornings, coffee cups, the way she folded the newspaper in half before she read it, the way she always knew when I was worried about something before I said a word, the way she called me Cliff when she was being serious, and old man when she was teasing me, and the way she laughed, which was a real laugh, the kind that surprised even her sometimes. I thought about the fact that she had been 22 years old and alone, and she had done the right thing at enormous cost to herself, and I had never known. I called Agent Creighton at 10:43 that night. He answered on the second ring. He told me they had been monitoring Fulton for several months. He told me that in the past week they had gathered enough to bring him in, and that he had been taken into custody 2 days before Dorothy died. She hadn't known, he said, because he hadn't been able to reach her in time. She had died, the way she had lived, still afraid, still protecting me. He told me to stay where I was for the night. He sent a colleague to the hotel within the hour, a young woman named Agent Flores, who sat with me for a while and explained the situation in plain language and drank terrible hotel coffee with me at midnight and didn't treat me like a fragile old man, which I appreciated more than I could say. My son called at 9 the next morning. I was still at the hotel. I told him I needed to see him. We sat in his kitchen, the 3 of us, my son, Nadine, and me. I could see Nadine knew something was coming. Her hands were around her coffee mug and she was very still. I put the letter on the table. Your mother wanted me to understand something, I said. I'm going to need you to understand it too. My son's name is Gerald. He's gone by Jerry his whole life, though his mother always called him by his full name when she was proud of him. I watched him read the letter, or try to. He got about 3 pages in, and he had to stop. He pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes, the way he used to when he was small and didn't want anyone to see him cry. Nadine put her hand on his back. I said, she did the right thing when she was young. She paid for it for the rest of her life. And she spent 40 years making sure we didn't have to pay for it with her. Jerry said, she should have told us. Yes, I said, she should have. She should have told you. Yes. He looked up. Are you angry at her? I thought about it honestly. I'd had the whole night to think about it. No, I said. I'm not. I understand why she did what she did. I don't have to agree with it to understand it. She was afraid of losing what she'd built. She was afraid of losing what she built. She was afraid of losing me. That's a very human thing to be afraid of. Jerry said, I would have wanted to know. I know. Me too. But she was the bravest person either of us ever knew, and she made decisions the best she could with what she had, and I'm not going to spend whatever time I've got left being angry at a woman who spent 40 years making sure I was safe. I paused. That doesn't mean I'm not going to sit with it for a while. He nodded. We sat with it together for a while. That's the thing about families. The sitting with it is as important as anything you say. It was Nadine who finally spoke. She said quietly, she came to see me about 2 months ago. She said she needed to ask me something woman to woman, she said. Nadine's eyes were wet. She asked me to make sure you weren't alone after she was gone. She made me promise not to tell Jerry or you that she'd asked, because she said you'd both argue about who was taking care of who. She almost smiled. She knew you both. I looked at my daughter-in-law, this woman I'd known for 14 years without ever quite breaking through to her. And I thought about my wife going quietly to her and asking her to look after me, doing it in secret the same way she did everything important, and I couldn't speak for a moment. Then I said, she knew you were the one who'd actually get it done. Nadine laughed and it surprised her, and for a second she sounded like Dot. The account she had moved money into had 6 months of living expenses in it. The passcode was 1981, and the address of the apartment on Clover Street, where we'd lived our first 2 years, where the radiator knocked all winter and we didn't care. I knew it before I finished the sentence she'd written. The FBI closed the Fulton case formally 6 weeks after Dorothy died. I received a letter from the Department of Justice that described in careful legal language that the threats against my wife had been credibly substantiated and were now resolved, and that her cooperation decades earlier had served the public interest at considerable personal cost, and that her courage was recognized. It was a formal letter, bureaucratic the way those things always are, but I kept it. It's in the box with her letter now. I go to Lakeview Cemetery on the first Sunday of every month. The groundskeeper's name is Harlan, I found out. He retired at the end of February. I don't know where he is now, but I think about him sometimes. About the fact that my wife trusted him with the most important thing she'd ever asked anyone to do, and he did it. A man she'd met once. A stranger. She had looked at him and known. She was good at knowing people. That's what I miss most, I think. Not just being known by her, though that was something I can't put into words, but watching her know other people. The way she'd meet someone once and understand them in some fundamental way that took me years to get to on my own. I don't know that there's a lesson in this. I'm 67 years old and I'm not much for drawing lessons from things. Life is not a lesson, it's just life. But I'll tell you this much. If someone you love kept a secret from you, even a large one, even one that changed the shape of what you thought you knew, before you decide how to feel about it, try to sit with why. Not to excuse it, just to understand it. Because sometimes what looks like a lie, when you finally hold it up to the light, turns out to be a kind of shelter. She sheltered me for 43 years. I'm going to spend a while learning to stand in the open. I keep coming back to the image of Dorothy at 22 years old, sitting alone in a government office in a city she'd never lived in, signing papers that erased the name she'd been born with. No family around. No one who knew her. Just a young woman who had done the right thing and was now paying for it in the quietest, most total way imaginable, by disappearing. That's where it starts for me, when I try to make sense of all of it. Not with the secret she kept, but with the courage it took to tell the truth in the first place. She was 22. She saw something wrong, and she said so, even knowing what it would cost her, that kind of honesty. The kind that doesn't calculate the personal price before it acts. That's not something you're just born with. It's something you choose over and over in small moments until it becomes who you are. Dot was that person long before I ever met her. I just didn't know the full shape of it until she was gone. And then there's the 40 years in between. 40 years of building something real while carrying something heavy. People talk about intelligence like it's a test score or a sharp answer in a meeting, but I think real intelligence is something quieter. It's knowing what to hold and what to put down, knowing which problems you can solve and which ones you have to simply live alongside. My wife could not solve what Stafford's son represented. She couldn't untestify. She couldn't undo the threat. What she could do was think carefully about how to protect the people she loved within the limits of what was possible. She moved money into my name. She found Harlan. She wrote 12 pages so I would understand, rather than just grieve. That's not deception. That's a particular kind of careful, disciplined thinking that I don't think I could have managed under the same weight. What I struggle with, still even now, is the idea that she carried it alone. That's the part I have to sit with honestly. There's a version of this where I feel shut out, where I feel like I wasn't trusted. I'd be lying if I said that version hasn't crossed my mind. But when I get honest with myself, I know what she was protecting. She was protecting the life we had built. And that took a kind of endurance I can only begin to respect now that I can see the whole of it. Decades of ordinary mornings, of not flinching, of choosing every single day not to let fear hollow out the good thing we had. That is its own form of strength. Not loud, not dramatic, not the kind anyone thanks you for. Just persistent, just steady, just there, every day, holding things together. I'm 67 years old. I don't have a lot of room left for regret, and I don't think Dot would want me spending what I have on it anyway. What I've been trying to do instead is carry forward what she modeled. Do the right thing even when it costs something. Think clearly when the feeling wants to swamp the thinking. Keep going when keeping going is the only real option you've got. She did all three for 40 years without asking for credit. The least I can do is try.